Here, we aim to revisit one of the most horrific events of the 20th century. We want to discuss a crime that took place between 1975 and 1979 in Cambodia, perpetrated by a group called the Khmer Rouge, under the leadership of a man named Pol Pot. This genocide and tragedy resulted in the death of approximately 2 million people out of Cambodia's population of 8 million in less than 4 years. Cambodia is a small country in Southeast Asia, bordered by Vietnam and Thailand. In the mid-19th century, the French colonized the country and ruled it for decades. However, during World War II, Japan occupied Cambodia. After Japan's defeat and the end of the war, Cambodia was once again placed under French control. Finally, in 1953, Cambodia gained independence from France. After independence, the country experienced a period of stability for several years. However, in 1970, Prime Minister Lon Nol staged a coup against the Cambodian king, abolishing the monarchy and establishing a republic, declaring himself president. Unlike the previous king, Lon Nol's government aligned itself with U.S. policies. As a result, shortly after the coup, Lon Nol sent his military forces to the Vietnamese border to fight alongside the Americans against the communist government of North Vietnam. Meanwhile, the ousted king fled to China, where he allied with a communist paramilitary group called the Khmer Rouge to fight General Lon Nol and reclaim his throne. The Khmer are an ancient ethnic group in Cambodia, and most of the country's current population is of Khmer descent. Between the 9th and 15th centuries, the Khmer had established a powerful empire that ruled over large parts of Southeast Asia, including present-day Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, and Myanmar. The Khmer Rouge, a Cambodian communist guerrilla group, emerged from this ethnic group and was founded in 1960 under the leadership of Pol Pot. Their goal was to fight capitalism and establish a communist government in Cambodia. Initially, however, they did not have much support among the people. The 1970 coup by General Lon Nol and the former king's willingness to collaborate with the Khmer Rouge provided them with a historic opportunity. After allying with the king and receiving military support from China and the Soviet Union, the Khmer Rouge declared war on Lon Nol's government. Cambodia quickly became engulfed in a civil war, with General Lon Nol now having to fight on two fronts, against North Vietnamese forces and the Khmer Rouge. The war lasted 5 years, leaving the country devastated, with an estimated 800,000 deaths and 2 million displaced individuals. However, the true nightmare for the Cambodian people began after the war ended. This horrifying chapter, according to behavioral science experts, continues to affect Cambodia's collective memory. In 1975, the Khmer Rouge defeated General Lon Nol, restoring the king to power. However, just a year later, Pol Pot, the leader of the Khmer Rouge, declared the establishment of a republic. The king fled the country once more, leaving Pol Pot, the communist leader of the Khmer Rouge, in full control. Before we delve into the tragic lives of the Cambodian people under Khmer Rouge rule, let's learn a bit about Pol Pot, the man his followers referred to as Brother Number One, who had now become the country's supreme leader. Born in 1925 to a wealthy Sino-Cambodian family, Pol Pot later falsely claimed in interviews that he had grown up in a poor household. He attended high school at a Catholic school and, not being particularly interested in his studies, decided at the age of 24 to pursue further education in France. Pol Pot had secured a scholarship from a university in Paris to study mechanical engineering. During his time in Paris, he became acquainted with French communist organizations and joined their secret societies. Pol Pot's exposure to the ideas of Karl Marx and Mao Zedong, the leader of China, had a profound impact on him. He became so deeply influenced that he abandoned his studies entirely to focus on revolutionary activities. His academic performance deteriorated to the point where he failed multiple exams and was eventually expelled from university. In 1953, Pol Pot returned to Cambodia. After years of promoting communist ideals, Pol Pot succeeded in forming the Khmer Rouge in 1960. Gradually, his power and influence grew among Cambodia's communist factions until he became the leader of the Communist Party. However, due to a wave of arrests and crackdowns targeting leftists in Cambodia, Pol Pot and his group were forced to flee to the border regions between Cambodia and Vietnam. This led to the events of the 1970 coup and the Cambodian Civil War, the story of which we have already covered, culminating in Pol Pot rising to power. In 1975, Pol Pot declared the year as Year Zero and the beginning of a new era in Cambodian history. He sought to demonstrate to the world how he would transform Cambodia into a true communist utopia. Pol Pot had long planned for this vision, which was centered on combating individualism and modernity. His solution was to reset the country to Year Zero. The new Cambodia envisioned by Pol Pot was a world without families, schools, technology, art, music, or books. The nation was to operate solely in service of society, striving for independence and self-sufficiency. His first order of business was to evacuate cities, forcing people to relocate to rural areas to work in collective farms. Urban living and modern conveniences were abolished. The government shut down schools, universities, newspapers, and even postal services. The use of vehicles and all modern devices, including bicycles, was banned. All foreign embassies were closed and Cambodia was cut off from the outside world. Speaking foreign languages was prohibited, and celebrating traditional or religious events became a punishable crime. Private property was outlawed, and all possessions, including homes, land, vehicles, and personal belongings, were seized by the state. People were forbidden from saying "I" or "mine," as individualism was considered a grave sin. The concept of family was erased. Children were instructed to address all men as uncle and all women as aunt, including their own parents, to obscure parent-child relationships. Romantic relationships were forbidden, and if a couple's love was discovered, they were executed because love was seen as a form of individualism. The government dictated every aspect of life, from living arrangements to sleep schedules. People were required to sleep and wake at the exact hours prescribed by the state. Even recreational activities, such as sports, were banned. Markets and shops were shut down, and the very concept of money was eliminated. Banknotes were repurposed as cigarette papers. The government also prohibited bartering. Citizens could neither buy nor exchange goods. They were required to work for the state for 14 to 18 hours daily, receiving only a daily food ration as their payment, often nothing more than a bowl of rice. Pol Pot ordered the execution of intellectuals, university professors, politicians, and even doctors. People who wore glasses were considered suspicious and could be executed simply for that reason. He divided the population into 3 categories: those who were obedient and loyal, those who were deemed potential dissenters, and those who were labeled enemies and marked for death. Anyone found guilty of even minor infractions was immediately placed in the 3rd category and added to the execution list. Before being killed, They were subjected to horrific torture. If 3 government informants reported someone for any reason, that person was arrested immediately. After torture, they were executed without investigation, trial, or due process. Among the prisoners, the vast majority faced execution. Before execution, prisoners were forced to dig large mass graves themselves. Afterward, they were killed and buried in those graves. Pol Pot believed that only 2 million people were needed to rebuild Cambodia's collective farms, and the rest of the population was deemed unnecessary. He frequently repeated a chilling phrase to the people: "To keep you is of no benefit, to destroy you is no loss." During the 3 years, 8 months, and 20 days of Khmer Rouge rule, approximately 2 million Cambodians lost their lives due to torture, executions, starvation, disease, and forced labor. In 1978, emboldened by his perceived success, Pol Pot launched an attack on Vietnam. However, after a year of fighting, his forces were defeated. In 1979, when the Vietnamese army entered Cambodia's capital, Phnom Penh, they were welcomed with joy by the Cambodian people. Desperate to escape the grip of the monstrous regime that had held them hostage, many Cambodians saw the foreign invaders as liberators. Pol Pot fled after his regime was overthrown. For 18 years he remained in hiding, evading justice. In 1997, he was finally captured and identified. He was set to stand trial the following year for crimes against humanity. However, just days before his first court session, Pol Pot died of a heart attack at the age of 72. Some believe he was forced to commit suicide, though the exact cause of his death remains uncertain. Ultimately, the manner of Pol Pot's death is inconsequential. What truly matters is that dictatorship is always doomed to fail, and no power can stand in the way of the dawn of freedom.